Good evening. I'm Whitney Donhauser, the Ronay Menschel Director and President here at the Museum of the City of New York. I'm so pleased to welcome you to the 2020 Louis Auchincloss Prize. This year's event looks decidedly different than prior years, as does nearly every aspect of life for us now. The Museum of the City of New York is dedicated to sharing and celebrating the countless stories of New York and keeping the vibrancy, creativity, and resilience of our great city alive through this collective struggle. This year's recipient of the Louis Auchincloss Prize is one of those remarkable stories. Tonight, we honor Toshiko Mori, a woman who has made an impressive architectural contribution to our beautiful city. Toshiko's work has touched our city in countless ways, including urban, civic, institutional, cultural, and residential projects, not to mention museum and exhibition design. Her New York City designs include public theater and library spaces, a park visitor center, subway canopies, a master plan for a university, and a brand new commercial building. We have an exciting program planned for this evening, featuring museum trustee and prize chair, Tracy Pontarelli, Louis Auchincloss's son, Andrew Auchincloss, philanthropist and champion of New York's cultural scene and close friend to Toshiko, Joan Davidson, and lastly, Toshiko herself in what promises to be an engaging and thoughtful conversation with Paola Antonelli, the Senior Curator of the Department of Architecture and Design, as well as the Director of Research and Development at the Museum of Modern Art. But before we kick off the program, we would like to share with you a brief video about how the Museum of the City of New York, through its exhibitions, collection, education center, and public programs, exist as New York storytellers. Your support of tonight's event will ensure that the museum keeps our 400-year history alive for years to come. Thank you for joining us in what promises to be an exciting and fun evening.
Some see a city. We see a 300 square mile residence, currently shared by over 8.5 million people who have made it their own. From kings and trailblazers to explorers and visionaries. Generations of the most influential families and some of the most colorful characters. Engaging eyewitnesses, eye-opening discoveries, and even some animals. After centuries of remodeling, we can't imagine living anywhere else. It's more than a city. To us, it's home. Welcome home. We're glad you're here.
Hello, everyone. I am Tracy Pontarelli, a longtime trustee of the Museum of the City of New York and the chair of the Louis Auchincloss Prize. I hope that short clip gave you a sense of just how important the Museum of the City of New York is and why I am so proud to serve at this amazing institution. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight as the museum presents the Louis Auchincloss Prize, as it has since 2007. This prize celebrates the creativity of those whose work is inspired and enhances the 5 boroughs of New York City through the disciplines of literature, art, music, playwriting, photography, and of course, architecture. As Whitney mentioned, the prize honors Louis Auchincloss for his many years of service to the Museum of the City of New York, as well as for his literary contributions that established him as one of the leading American novelists of the 20th and 21st centuries. Louis was the first prize recipient, paving the way for a very special group of New Yorkers, including Gloria Steinem, Mikiko Kakutani, Winston Marsalis, Philip Glass, Tony Kushner, and Ada Louise Huxtable. We are so happy to add Toshiko Mori's name to this esteemed and diverse roster. As Whitney said earlier, this is a very different year for the museum. and for the city it serves. While we all continue to try and navigate what our lives look like today, it can be easy to take occasions like this for granted. But in times of chaos and confusion, the arts and humanities are what brings so many of us comfort, while the creativity and vision of artists provide much needed context for what we experience. And so, in many respects, the Louis Auchincloss Prize has never been more important than this year. And we are delighted to continue this annual celebration of New York's cultural innovators. I am now pleased to introduce Andrew Auchincloss, who will share a few words about his father and the legacy of this prize.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the museum and all its trustees for continuing to honor my father's legacy with the Louis Auchincloss Prize. This occasion is always special for the family, including my brother John, his wife Tracy, my brother Blake, his wife Lisa, my wife Tracy, and the 7 grandchildren. Our hearts are warmed every year at this time by thinking just how hugely gratified Louis would have been by all of the elements of this ceremony. First, we have the city of New York, where he was born and which he loved. Next, we have this museum, which represented one of the major commitments of his life, having served on its board of trustees for over 4 decades. Few things gave him greater pleasure later in his life, he died in 2010, than seeing the museum take off under its current leadership. And finally, we have a wonderful honoree this year in Toshiko Mori. I'm not sure whether my father and Toshiko ever met in person, but I'm entirely sure he would have been awed by the brilliance of her architecture and the depth of her commitment to the city. On behalf of my father's family, I'd like to congratulate Ms. Mori on winning this award. It is now my honor to introduce Joan Davidson. Joan Davidson is synonymous with New York City's cultural landscape, having served as an advisor and philanthropist to countless nonprofit arts organizations. Joan has helped to shape our city and its many organizations. She has steered the trajectory of statewide arts and culture through past service as the New York State Commissioner of the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and Chair of the New York State Council of the Arts. Furthermore, Joan has served as a trustee of several seminal New York City institutions, including the Cooper Hewitt Museum, where Toshiko lent her expertise to several exhibition designs. It is now with great pleasure that I welcome Joan Davidson as she presents Toshiko Mori with the Louis Auchincloss Prize.
Good evening. Thank you, Andrew, for that wonderful introduction. Your father's legacy shines brightly still. He was a hero to this institution and to the city of New York, and I liked and admired him immensely. So I greatly look forward to presenting the award in his name to my friend Toshiko Mori. This is an honor indeed. Toshiko Mori is a visionary, a philosopher of the natural and the built environment, and a wonderful person, and my lively and generous friend. Over the years, our paths have come together in various adventures, and looking back from the very beginning, the adventure was watching Toshiko transform her charming little simple farmhouse on North Haven in Maine into the fabulous house it became. And then there was the Cambridge adventure. I had gone up there to spend some time doing a special program at Radcliffe. And Toshiko was then at the Harvard Graduate School of Design, and she took me under her wing and steered me to the chic cafes, to the interesting shops, to the offbeat theater, and to a wonderful bunch of neighbors and friends. And in that long, dry study period, it made all the difference. And then on weekends, in later years, on weekends up at my house, my upstate New York house on the Hudson River, we all had fine times. And because Toshiko loves water and rivers and all bodies of water and reveres the idea of water and uses it in her work, it became very clear we had to have a boathouse on the river, down at the riverside. So that led to all kinds of schemings and plannings and proposals and ideas and among the group. And we came to the conclusion that it would be brilliant to try to make a boathouse out of one of those standard, what do you call them, the containers, the shipping containers, because we thought it would be simple, it would be quick, it would be cheap. Ha ha. Then we all started making plans and designing, and it turned out that we decided to add plumbing, and then there had to be windows, and then why not put in some cooking facilities while we're at it? And how about a roof deck? And by the time we were finished, this thing had gone wildly expensive and completely implausible. But we had a wonderful time doing it. It gives me great pleasure, of course, to present this award and also to do it at this wonderful museum, which itself is such a gift to the city of New York. So wait for the video. You're going to enjoy it. You're going to learn a lot and have a fine time about the life and creations and accomplishments of my friend Toshiko. Enjoy.
Gracefulness is rarely a word that you find used to describe architecture. And yet, her work is so graceful.
Her work lifts you up.
It's inspirational, visionary.
Always feels world-class and deeply personalized at the same time.
My name is Toshiko Mori, and I'm an architect, and I'm also a professor at Harvard University Graduate School of Design. What's unique about our team and myself is to approach each project very differently and think of unique qualities of each and every project. I try to focus on clarity, that design is very clear in structures, and then it's long life.
She is interested in the long term and in lasting values, in buildings that will look as elegant and serene and beautiful in 10 or 20 years as they do the minute they're finished.
When I look at her work, it brings me a lot of peace. And in this world, peace is very important.
There's a Japanese word called iyashi, which translates to healing. And I really don't say it out loud, but it's in my ethos to provide those moments of repose in architecture that I create.
What Toshiko has contributed to the city is immeasurable.
The brief for Toshiko was to create a space that would be very generous towards the art, but at the same time capable of embracing a great deal of flexibility. So whether it be paintings going on a wall to a Marina Abramovich performance, the space is very much designed more like a theater, so that we can literally create installations that virtually no other gallery in New York could accommodate.
What's visionary about the beautiful butterfly that she created landing on the roof of Brooklyn Children's Museum is that it creates a really extraordinary covered outdoor space for 1,000 people. But what's even more amazing is that it is an architecturally significant piece of art.
You walk into the Central Library and it's beautiful. It's like a magnet. It looks as though it's always been there, even though it's a tech center in a building that was designed and constructed before anybody was thinking about computers. It's created a place where people want to come and gather and spend time in. And it's become a focal point in this community of Brooklyn.
The canopy at Hudson Yards is actually a place that makes you want to come there. You want to use the subway. It has very much of an ethereal feel to it.
We wanted to make a connection with everybody's daily life. A moment of quiet before they go to work, a moment of quiet and safety before they go home.
Her ability to apply her own culture to our culture has greatly enriched the architectural environment we live in.
Yes, I'm Japanese in nationality, but I think these days many of us associate our origin with cities instead of countries. And if that's the case, I'm a quintessential New Yorker. Every time I come back to New York, it just makes my heart beats coming across the bridges. It's very high energy, fast, lively, and busy, and you'll be enlightened and inspired by every single encounter. I'm so lucky to be able to live and work in New York City. So when I think of the work I have done, I really think of everyday life of New Yorkers.
Good evening. This is Toshiko Mori. I'm humbled and privileged and honored to receive a Louis Auchincloss Prize tonight from the Museum of the City of New York, an institution that celebrates the legacy of this great city. Thank you, Whitney Danhauser, the director and the president of the museum, Keith Butler, the vice president of development, Tracy Pontarelli, Christina Davis, and the member of the selection committee, and the board of directors. And thank you to Jackie Zerman, the director of special events, who organized tonight's events along with Samantha Fleck, and to Rebecca Dreyfuss, who produced a wonderful film you just saw. And thank you to the Auchincloss family for establishing this prize. To tell you the truth, I have no idea, and I'm really not sure how and why I deserve this honor, but it gives me immense pleasure because this prize, more than anything, recognizes one as a true New Yorker. As an immigrant who arrived here as a high school student in the late 60s, who witnessed and lived through its ups and downs, who committed to live and work in the city, and who now considers the place my true home. I'm inspired by New York City every day of my life. During the current pandemic, I have observed the city's resiliency, and I am confident that it will come back even stronger as a united and diverse community of people who care for each other. New York City has always been the epicenter of the world and has undergone multiple crises in the past, but it always emerges stronger than ever. I must mention that I did meet Mr. Auchincloss when I was a student and staying with a publisher who was a friend of my family. I was introduced to him on the street in Upper East Side. I was told he was a prominent lawyer and a prolific writer. He made a strong impression on me then because he was someone who took a significant professional role in a society
while allowing his imagination soar to contribute to arts and culture. Multi-talented individuals like him drives the creative energy of this city. So I'm very thankful for this prize for that reason. In New York City, it is gritty and tough at times. We all work day in and day out. We are all hard workers, but we try our best to contribute to the lives of people in the city. As architects, we try in our modest manner to incrementally improve the daily lives of citizens in moments both small and large. We hope the spaces we create generate communal experiences and good memories while also making life a bit more dignified, equitable, and just for everyone. As an architect in the city, life is challenging, and I owe a huge thanks to my team at the office, my consultants, my builders, my amazing clients, some of whom, from whom you have just heard on the film, my collaborators and friends, and last but not the least, to my family who has continually supported me, including my husband, Jamie Carpenter, and daughter, Tay Carpenter, and her family. Thank you for this honor. This is the most meaningful and significant recognition I have ever received because I love New York City and its people. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Toshiko. And on behalf of everyone here at the museum, we are so proud to honor you and your spectacular work this evening. And now, Toshiko will discuss her work and the greater architectural landscape of New York City with Paola Antonelli. Paola is an author, editor, lecturer, and the senior curator of the Department of Architecture and Design, as well as the Director of Research and Development at the Museum of Modern Art. Paola loves to celebrate design's presence in every part of life, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. So now join me in welcoming Toshiko and Paola on the screen.
Well, here we are. Toshiko, my dear friend, congratulations on an award that is well-deserved.
Thank you, Paola. Thank you for being with me tonight. It means a lot because being a longtime friend.
I know. Thank you for the honor. And actually, I'm a little concerned about the fact that we have to behave and pretend that we're going to have a very serious conversation tonight, which we always do. Let's be frank.
Yes.
But seriously speaking, we go back a long time, and we've had also, I have to say, we also had quite a few adventures together. And I've had a chance to see you in many different situations as an architect, as an educator, as a lecturer and a leader of complex groups of research. And always, it's what struck me all the time is that people, yes, say that you're graceful, yes, say that you're elegant, but in truth, you are laser cut, clear, and organized like a katana sword. And it's interesting because architects tend to be inherently constructive beings, right? But constructing doesn't only mean buildings. You can also construct society. But anytime there's a crisis, architects, and especially you, seem to really get to work. I remember that after the 2008 crisis, you started a whole research office within your office, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we started this small research think tank because we thought that architecture is just not building, but way of thinking through. We are very good at teamwork, as you can see. And then we are actually very good at assembling very complex issues together. And then to connect isolated silos so people can start to have a large picture of what's really happening. So then the conversation starts. And then we have a chance to improve the society, improve the environment. And we saw that ability of architecture beyond the building is immense in a way we can process information and knowledge. And we work teams. So I always say that you really don't see too many buildings falling down, whereas you can see financial systems collapse.
So architecture is an incredible resilient structure, metaphorically and systematically. So why don't we introduce that in a societal construct, as you mentioned?
That is so important. And, sooner or later, our dear friends and viewers, we will talk about buildings. But as Toshiko just said, it's beyond the building. Architecture is beyond the building. And I would like to touch on her amazing work as an educator. I mean, Toshiko for a while was also the dean of the architecture school at Harvard, but whether she was dean or not, her courses were always eye-openers and mind-openers for the students. I remember early on, before it was a fancy to do so, she was talking about textiles as metaphors and suggestions for building and construction. And more recently, you've been incredibly active in the whole discussion about decolonizing, about making schools more diverse, about really trying to open up what the world of architecture used to be to a reality instead that is much more multifaceted. Can you tell us more about what it means to be an educator in architecture and what needs to be done?
I just have to I was never a dean, I was the chair of a department.
Oh yes, chair of the department. You're so right. I always get confused with title. I apologize. So there's the dean, but Toshiko was the chair of the department. So she ran architecture. Thank you for making it correct.
2008. But educate, John Haydock, as you mentioned at Cooper Union, always said that teaching is a birthright of architect, because we are given a commission by the society. It's a gift for us. And then we build, we give up. And then to make next generations, it's our obligation. He called it social contract, the society, to teach the next generation of architects. And I actually take it seriously. And besides, it's actually a lot of fun. I learn a lot. I think I learn more than I teach, in fact. And one will be keeping up with the thinking process of next generation. And as Paola mentioned before, this is another crisis we're facing. Black Lives Matter. In architecture, there are very, very few representations of African Americans, and especially African American women. And there is a systematic prejudice, and then really a wrong way of conceiving architecture, which is very Western-centric. And then in a way, quote unquote, I don't use this word easily, but the white suprematist point of view. Whereas we have so much to learn from this culture, which contributes enormous amount to our society. It's part of our culture, but somehow architecture of all the arts have been neglecting it. Fashion incorporates on it, music, dance, performance arts, but architecture really turned its back against this amazing culture of our African American community. So I did a class called House of Our Time, really focusing on what happens instead of the paradigm precedents you are studying is not Western, what's known precedents, but then you actually focus on culture of African Americans to really create a new paradigm of architecture. And I think students came up with 12 different ideas. I have to say it's a dangerous territory I've gone to. There's a lot of landmines. And I had to ask 8 friends, African Americans, to come to class in conversation with it, support us so that we don't step onto landmines, but know what landmines are in these circumstances. So it's not smooth work we can do, but we have to start. We have to start somewhere. And there's an amazing collective called Black Reconstruction Collective, which has been giving the talks everywhere. And I think it's, again, the beginning of new awareness, new way of approaching architecture, new way that architects will rethink our role in society. This is a crisis-driven idea, but that's when crisis is helpful.
Absolutely. And you are a New Yorker, completely New Yorker through thick and thin, but you're also a Tokyoite.
Yeah.
So you're also from Tokyo. It's nice to be from 2 places. What does it mean to be a Tokyoite versus being a New Yorker?
Well, I don't live in Tokyo, and my family is there, I visit. and I have friends there. And I am actually very active in some groups. We actually put together a post-COVID proposal to the governor of Tokyo together after during the lockdown, because they like to have an idea from a New Yorker, because they look at New York as the cities they aspire to. And it's amazing. And what New York goes, we want to go there. Tokyo itself, I have to keep saying, you have your own attributes and characteristics that you don't want to be a generic city. And then I have to do the opposite and then tell them what's so different about Tokyo, which you need to really make it important. So it's very interesting exchange of ideas, and it's very productive conversations that I'm actually able to contrast and see both cities as they thriving in this world of crisis.
So the city right now is wounded, right? New York is wounded right now. I'm sure that we'll bounce back, but it's about healing. So you talked about the importance of healing in your practice. So what do you envision wanting to do to heal New York at this time?
I think everybody has to just take a long breathing, and just rethink of values, what's important to you. And there's a strange silver lining in this crisis in which a lot of people are spending time with families, and everybody's missing friends and social interactions. And in a way, we really look at we're sleeping a little bit better, we are eating food, and I think we're walking everywhere. So in a way, our behavior has changed to actually a healthier lifestyle, I think. And then one will rethink what's really essential, what's really important to us. And then that's actually going to make a very big cultural shift. And that's like every client, they're asking that question, and how do we actually align our institutions to post-COVID time? And how do we change the way we program, the way we build, the way we open up the institutions? I think opening up an institution is critical. Like Linda Johnson said about Brooklyn Public Library, they're really opening up and having civic commons, information commons, and transforming institutions.
Interesting. So the idea of opening up institutions, how does it get reflected also in the private practice and developers, for instance? Do you think that this crisis has been beneficial to the situation of developments in New York City?
I'm not really sure, but I think one can develop in a different way. As I said before, equitable solutions are necessary. I think we just can't live alone. That's one of our awareness we came after COVID. We have to have a community who live around us. And that means, for example, housing or offices, it has to be available and affordable to more people in more diverse communities. And idea of accessibility, an idea of functionality, that needs to be changed. And they might say it's actually economic drawback, but in the long run, that's how we survive. And that's how one grows another society of economic growth. And that's how we came to realize as a result of crisis that we just have to include everybody. We have to go forward all together.
So here in New York, you have designed and actually built so much, stores, cafes, visitor centers, galleries, libraries, subway canopies, master plans, exhibitions, theaters, all sorts of different wonderful places. What would you like? What is missing? What is it that you would dream of building in New York City?
A school.
A school.
Yes.
So interesting. You said it right away. And you had that beautiful experience also in Senegal with schools, right? So
yeah, I built a first school ever, elementary school in a very remote region in Senegal. And I think school has to be a joyous place. And school is where kids enjoy going. And I think school means education system, me being a teacher, I think architecture is such a great discipline to teach kids how to look at cities. And from learning from cities, I think Museum City of New York, I think you can actually do an amazing program for kids learning from cities. So there's something wrong with way the kids are educated. And I feel like a new type of school, which really thinks about environment, cities, the way people live. And there's a math involved, there's a language involved, there's sociology, there's much more inclusive way of learning so that the kids can develop a more holistic way of thinking. So I think that kind of school is missing, and New York is a prime place to have a school like that.
And in a way, the architecture would guide this idea of pedagogy.
Yeah.
Can you envision it? Can you visualize it? Where would it be?
I think this is it. I don't really think it as a monument, but I think it can actually inhabit within existing schools. So it will go within existing structures and start to transform it. Because you really don't want to make something very different, which makes it, again, one class against the other. But idea for any institution is actually within its own envelope, developing this new program. So it transforms from inside out.
And it'll find its own form. You know, in Sao Paulo, in Brazil, there was this, you know it, but I want to tell our public, there was this amazing woman architect from Milan, but she had immigrated into Brazil, and her name was Lina Bobardi.
I love her work.
Yeah, of course. And I was thinking she has designed and built all these amazing buildings, especially all these social buildings for the people. You know, they're called SESCI, these beautiful buildings where people could go and learn and do sports, etc., to such an extent that the people of Sao Paulo, everybody used to call her La Lina, as if it were an ant. So I think that at some point we will call you La Toshiko.
Yes.
In New York, La Toshiko. So Toshiko, what does it mean to be a good citizen architect?
Well, I don't know about good, because sometimes we have to be bad to really make a big opposition and speak up. And so in a way, citizen architects is very important. And that's actually goes back to Louis Auchincloss, in which he is a lawyer, but he's a citizen lawyer. And then also he wrote fictions. So there's a relationship that we establish between our profession and arts and culture and city and people. That's a role model I've been very interesting. It's actually engagement and with citizens and activity of citizens that probably will create a common ground for a lot of people, a common ground of creativity, really.
So it's about dialogue, which is something that New Yorkers really thrive on, right? Really engaging with other people and being curious. It's what you were describing also in your video.
Yeah, dialogue and sometimes discussion and sometimes really lively discussion, like fights. But it's okay. And everybody actually has, New Yorker by and large is incredibly opinionated. He or she has our own opinions, and they everybody expresses it. And I think that's what makes New York so lively and strong.
And do you think that architects make good politicians?
I don't know, because I don't know the politics, and politics sounds really.
But you do. You're always, like when you were working on the master plan of NYU, it was politics. You're always immersed in politics.
Yeah, I think architecture is political. Yeah. Act of architecture is always political. We can't escape it. But the fact of can we become good politicians or not, I'm not so sure, because there's all sorts of political machinery we have to be a part of. And I think maybe architects are better off to be aware of its own political role and
and be thorns in the side of politicians.
I think.
But when you were dealing with the master plan for New York University, all of a sudden you probably became aware of a reality. I don't know, were you already aware of what it meant to work with whole neighborhoods before that?
Right. That was actually very interesting. We made a very simple strategy. If NYU were to grow, it's only has two ways. One is this big being, elephant. It's either start to invade entire community or a village, and that could be decentralized. It could be fragmented. Is that better? Or is that better to keep the big elephant on his or her own little cage on its own footprint? So the choice we made is to keep the elephant on its footprint. So whatever we proposed is built on NYU's own footprint, so that it actually is contained. It's a very simple idea. And it may not be so politically wise because people may want to have it dispersed. But once you start to disperse institutions like that, the quality of each area, each street can be transformed. And it has a danger of becoming incredibly generic with NYU purple flags all over. But instead, I think concentrating on it, on its own footprint, we thought was a right way to go.
And even though people might disagree with that, New York is a little bit of a China shop, so an elephant needs to be kept under control. It is a China shop. It's very delicate in its kind of brutality. Right. So really, I wanted this brief conversation to be a chance for people that are looking at us to get a taste of how wonderful, deep, complex, and absolutely visionary you are. There is so much that you've done at all scales. There's so much more that you can do. Leave us with a good idea of how to behave as citizens in New York City in the next few months. What would you like the people around you to be more than anything?
I want everyone to be very thoughtful for other people, that you care for others, and you, especially like COVID, we wear masks not to protect yourself, but you're protecting others too. So this idea of your relationship to others, individual, collective, and that's one thing you have to be aware of. And I think this thoughtful community that cares for each other, that's going to be the glue of a community that can survive and that can go stronger. I think that's something really is thoughtfulness for your neighbors, your community, people on the street. Be nice to delivery person, be nice to the kids on the street. It's like, it's not so hard to be nice.
Blessed words, my dear. You've been a wonderful, wonderful friend and also a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Paola.
Wow. Thank you both, Toshiko and Paola, for what was a really thoughtful conversation about the role of architecture in New York City and around the globe. And Toshiko, we are so humbled to honor you and your breathtaking work. So if you enjoyed tonight's program, please use the link below to donate to the museum in honor of Toshiko. Any support is greatly appreciated and will help the museum to continue engaging visitors by celebrating, documenting, and interpreting the city's past, present, and future. Your support is crucial for our exhibitions, the stewardship of our extraordinary collection, and the essential education programs that serve over 50,000 New York City educators and children throughout our Frederick A.O. Schwartz Education Center. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Stay well, and I hope to see you all around the museum soon.